Increase was mainly due to higher production of iron and steel, motor vehicles and parts. Last year, Easter fell in March rather than April, which disrupted March production and made it easier to record a better number this year. South African factories are expected to fare moderately better this year, but they're still struggling to be competitive with low productivity as well as rising costs. Oh, that's a conversation that Francis is going to have now, isn't it, Francis?
Indeed, we're joined by Philippa Rodseth, who is the Executive Director of the Manufacturing Circle, that of course represents some of the country's biggest manufacturers. Thank you for joining us, Philippa. So some predictions were a decline, possibly up to 2%. So are you very relieved with today's number, even though it's nothing major, just 0.3%?
We're always pleased to see increase and growth, albeit marginal on a year-on-year basis. However, what we must also have a look at is the performance for the first quarter, which shows a 0.9% decline in comparison to the last quarter of last year. So although we see a monthly improvement, we need to have a look and see what is happening in the medium and longer term in terms of trends, because in general we would like to see sustained and continued growth, which we do believe is possible to achieve.
To what extent does manufacturing affect overall growth? Because we had concerns about possible recessions after the downgrade. If we look at the negative growth at the end of last year, how much did factories contribute to that, and how much could they contribute to growth?
Manufacturing is intrinsically linked to GDP growth. As the Manufacturing Circle, we maintain that manufacturing is the engine and growth engine of the South African economy. So the two are intrinsically linked. Manufacturing reflects what is happening in terms of GDP growth, but it can also in turn drive it. Manufacturing has what we call great linkages and multiplier effects in terms of, if you manufacture toothpaste, for example, you've got to package it, you've got to transport it. So it definitely can benefit growth in the economy.
So if we are to avoid a recession this year, manufacturing is crucial.
Manufacturing is one of our greatest hopes for job-rich growth in the country.
Okay, so today's figure a little bit better, but like you say, for the quarter, not great. And is it fair enough to say that in South Africa we've been concerned that this sector has been in decline over a number of years?
If we look at the statistics over a period, yes, manufacturing at the moment contributes about 13% to GDP, and that has declined from the sort of the high teens, early 20s, 20% contribution to GDP in the mid-80s. And there are various reasons for that, but there are also studies that show for South Africa's level of development, there's no reason why manufacturing couldn't contribute more to GDP, and in so doing create jobs as well.
But the issues are there. Labour, productivity, we often talk about, and it's not always the labourers, it's sometimes the technology they're working with. But this at the same time when everybody's demanding better wages, when the world is becoming so technologically advanced, we're talking about robots replacing those unskilled workers. Where's it all going? What is your outlook for our factories?
We can't afford to lose the manufacturing sector, specifically and particularly in our country where we've got such high levels of unemployment. And manufacturing offers a lot of opportunities to absorb labour, to upskill, and also an ability to move up the value chain. So one can become more advanced in the type of manufacturing one does, and that then impacts positively on services. So it's the industrialisation, and some would argue the re-industrialization of the South African economy is critical in terms of creating jobs and growth. Otherwise, we end up with a scenario where we've got what we call a missing middle, where you've got low-skilled, low-labor jobs and then very high-skilled service-related jobs, and nothing in the middle.
So are factories taking that seriously and upskilling? I mean, because this feeds into transformation, all of those issues as well.
Absolutely, and it's not a challenge that is only particular to our country. We find a lot of our members are engaged in work in terms of upskilling within organizations. As Manufacturing Circle, one of the areas our members have identified as an area requiring greater training is actually at the management level on shop floors in order to become more competitive. So somebody might have graduated as an engineer and have sort of the theoretical skills but not much experience in terms of managing a factory, how to optimize run lines and inventory levels, for example. So there's a lot more that we can do to become more competitive, and our members are engaging in that regard.
Are there any areas you're excited about? Because you often look at this data, and cars often mentioned, and we've successfully attracted car makers from all over the world. So maybe that's a bright spot. Are there others as well? I think some people in South Africa don't even know what we really actually make.
That's a good question, and we like to look at. We work very closely with the Department of Trade and Industry, and there's been quite a focus on various clusters. Automotive, you've mentioned. Clothing and textiles is something where there's been a lot of work to arrest the decline of that sector, and it's a multi-pronged approach in terms of increasing demand, looking at tariffs, providing support. Agro-processing is now a new area of focus as far as the Department of Trade and Industry is concerned, and where we are also looking at working. At the moment, quite a lot of our inputs are actually imported. We don't grow enough potatoes, for example, in South Africa. So if we can increase that entire value chain, there's a lot of opportunities in agro-processing, for example.
And if we're importing a lot, are you very worried about rand volatility this year?
Rand volatility is something that definitely impacts our manufacturers. And part of the issue is that some of the inputs are imported. So it becomes very difficult to plan if you're having to import inputs and price that or cost that and then price your end product. So volatility of the rand definitely affects our manufacturers negatively.
In finality, there was an expectation maybe manufacturing will get a little bit better this year, but now 2 downgrades. What does it mean for this year as a whole?
Anything that impacts on GDP growth is going to impact on manufacturing. So if we've got a ratings downgrade, which means that less revenue can then be applied to invest in manufacturing, in infrastructure, in various areas, that is going to impact on our sector. However, we do maintain that we need to attain a competitive manufacturing environment, attain a supportive international trade position, increase the reputation of locally manufactured products. So there are, in spite of the fact that we've, the outlook in terms of GDP growth isn't hugely positive, there are things that we can do in order to change the situation.
All right, so let's keep going. Thank you so much for your time. Philippa Rodseth from the Manufacturing Circle. Let's take a quick look at the numbers. The rand strengthened for